Hi and welcome to a new video on coins and banknotes issued during occupation or under some sort of puppet government rule. So not limited to World War II, we also feature World War I, but unfortunately not other wars or complicate. I literally spent 1 minute trying to figure out the word complicated. Yes, it's complicated. I forgot how to pronounce it. But no complicated Cold War relationships of countries using such currencies. But one thing that will not be featured in this video, but I will quickly show off, is the Asian theater in the Second World War, where the Japanese government issued a bunch of banknotes for their occupied territories, like the Philippines, Burma, Indonesia, and so on. These I have here, but they are featured in another video, so I suggest you go check that out. It's called Occupation/Invasion Money. A video I released last year. More on those in that one. But moving on, to not make their double documentation in these videos. I tried to not do that. Why not start off with Denmark? I could have featured more coins here really, but I also have a coin on Denmark's, so a video on Danish coins, so check that one out. So this is a 5 kroner Denmark. I believe this one arrived too late to be featured in that video. The National Bank's banknotes are redeemed with gold after valid law. The National Bank of Denmark, 1942. They were not redeemed by gold. That is fake news. But I believe these banknotes were issued even before World War II. So, but the Swedish banknotes also featured redeemed by gold until the 1960s, when that hadn't been the case since the 1920s or the start of 1930 or such. But this is a banknote issued during World War II and during the occupation of Denmark, and now it started raining outside. I hope it isn't too distracting. Earlier this day, when I thought about making this video, it was actually sunny. Not now. And then this one has been really circulated also. And this is the other side, it's just the Danish coat of arms. So there's nothing fancy really about it just being issued during World War II. And for more facts about Denmark, that the Danes were allowed to retain their government as long as it pursued German interest during the occupation of Denmark. So this is, I believe, the independent national bank belonging to the sort of independent Danish government, which of course were expected to follow German rules and wishes, which finally they didn't quite do as much as the Germans wished. So I think they were put more into direct rule by 1943, 1944. But by 1942, they were still allowed to have their sort of independent government in Copenhagen. So that's Denmark. I have more coins on that, but check out the Danish video on that. But why not move on to a neighboring country? Here is 5 Norwegian öre. You can see it's dated 1941. Also, I had a wound earlier today, if you were wondering. So this is the same design that existed since 1908, if I read correctly. So this is an old Norwegian, but also Viking symbols. Come on. Yeah, it's an old Viking, but also an old Viking Norse symbol, but also used as a symbol of Norway. I don't recall its name. Now, despite being 1941, these were still issued with Hakon the 7th monogram. Kongeriket Norge, the Kingdom of Norge, or the Kingdom of Norway. that was a mix of languages. So despite being the king having fled to Britain and the country ending up under German occupation, they still, the year after 1940, the king having fled in 1940, here in 1941, they still minted the coins with his monogram. But that would change. They would figure out that it's rather weird. So in the next bunch of coins, also having changed the metal, that being copper nickel perhaps, not quite sure, or bronze perhaps. We have this possibly iron coin, this one in particular from 1944. It's the same design, but just different year, different material. And it's really common to have different material during war times. It happens in basically every country. Something that's usually copper changes to iron or to zinc or some such, and then is changed back yet again after the war is done. It happened during World War I and it happened during World War II. But as I said, they learned their lesson in quotes, and by 1940, this one started being issued in 1941, the same year as that one, replacing, I guess they were both still used at the same time, and that one actually being one of the most minted ones of this type, having existed from 1908. But this one's still minted in 1941 dwarfed the amount made of those. So I guess they really wanted to make new ones to replace the old one with the kings. But I'm not really sure if they were actively being replaced though. But enough suspension. How does the other side look like? Is the Norwegian coat of arms, at least the coat of arms used, the small coat of arms used by the new fascist puppet government that existed in Norway. Since the, since the king and the government fled to Britain during the war, a fascist puppet state were put in charge, or at least pretended to be put in charge. Then there were also German occupation authorities who really had the last word. And now we are no longer the Kingdom of Norway. We are just Norway, just Norway, and the coat of arms and those things on the left and right. So yeah, that's how they were changed, and those were continued to be produced until 1945. Really bad. Oh, here we have a good zoom. So there we have the comparison. And strangely, they did not mint krone coins. I'm not sure about banknotes, but I doubt they even printed banknotes during the war, which is strange. At least not new types. But neither did Denmark for that matter. But they printed new öre coins, I believe 1, 2 and 5, well possibly even 25 and 50 öre. But no new krone coins were minted during the war. So there are no large coins with this coat of arms. That never existed. I'm not really quite sure why. But I guess they needed a small change and not any more large coins. So I guess they had to use the coins with the king and the king's motto on them. But moving on, we have a lot to go through. Let's start with this one. Now, this one quickly was featured in the Invasion Money video. It's a 2 franc issued by the Vichy French government, which was the puppet, semi-independent puppet state that existed in France after the fall of France and the surrender of France in 1940. This fascist, or at least ultra-nationalist, pro-German state under Field Marshal Pétain issued their own currency, replacing the old French Republican ideals and motto with travail, famille, patrie. And that's probably absolutely terrible French, but at least I tried. I believe it's work, family, and fatherland. So it's obviously a change from ideals of justice and brotherhood to just nationalism, I guess. This one issued in 1943. On the other side, we have the hammer and the French state. No longer the French Republic, but just the French state. We are no lousy democracy. We are the ultra-conservative, nationalist, fascist, pro-German French state. Yes. Yeah. Who collaborated with the Germans. That's the 2 franc. We also have the 1 franc here, which was upside down. You might be wondering, well, how's the weight on this one? I can say that they're aluminium, so it's really comparison. Holy shit, it's like, yeah, it weighs nothing, barely makes a sound. The other side is the same. They remind you of the coins, French coins prior and after. I have a comparison for this video, but to the French coins prior and after these ones being issued, except with a fascist French state touch. Yeah, but not only doing the fascist French, we also have this one. Also two French. Not made of aluminium, this is actually brass, I think. Yeah, and with the Republican motto. Issued in 1944. Liberté, égalité, fraternité. Forgive me. With perhaps some blood or some such, who knows. Yeah, this was minted by the Americans for use in the invasion of French or French territory, as you can see, for 1944. Probably minted 1943 or 1944. But to be used from 1944 and onwards. With a simple France. Now, these were minted by the Americans without French approval, I think, but the French made them legal in 1945 after the fact. But until then they were used as French coins issued by the Americans and their troops for fighting in French territory. Pretty nice. Having a coin of the Free French forces or the French coin of the Allied forces, but also of the French puppet government. And after World War II, one country suffered occupation under the Allierte Militärbehörde in Umlauf Geheisst in Deutschland in the series of 1944 in the value of 5 mark. This is an Allied occupation banknote of Germany. Now, these were issued by the Allies. I believe the Americans designed them, but they were also printed by other Allied powers. So these ones were also printed by the Soviets for use in occupied Germany for at least the first years after the war. I'm not really an expert on this area, so I think possibly the Reichsmark were still also used alongside these ones before being replaced in 1948 by two different currencies in West and East Germany, both competing with each other of being the real mark. But this is a continuation of the Reichsmark printed in the Allied countries. On the other side we just have a simple M for mark. Really simple and rectangular banknotes. So I believe this exists also in Pfennig, 50 Pfennig, 1 mark, 2, 3 mark, 5 mark, and they are larger denominations, but I don't think they're rectangular, they're more like regular longer banknotes. Not in a top shape, but a piece of history to have, that Germany could also suffer the fate of occupation. But moving back to German occupation of other countries, we have this one over here. This one, the type is a Yugoslav 1929, I think, 100 dinara banknote, but that has been overprinted in the 1st of May 1941 by the Serbian National Bank. Serbia, of course, along with the entirety of Yugoslavia in 1941, were invaded and occupied by Germany and Italy. There also been created a Croatian fascist puppet state in the country. But these banknotes were not issued in the Croatian territory, I believe. The Croatian territory would, or the Croatian puppet state would issue their own money. But in the areas not occupied by Italy or this Croatian state, but the remnants of Serbia, these Yugoslavian banknotes were overprinted and issued for the German occupied parts of Serbia. Now, this I didn't actually actively try to buy this, it was included with an Eastern European loot. So you can see it's 100 dinara with one side here being in the Latin alphabet, but with the other text being in Cyrillic, Serbian being written in both. So that's actually an interesting part of history. But now moving away from World War II and into the really rare stuff on this table and in my collection overall, really. Starting off with this coin right over here. It's 1 kopeck. But it's not just a kopeck. Kopeck being the subdivision of the Russian ruble. It's a kopeck with an iron cross on it. Yes, it's a German kopeck. From 1916 to be used in the occupied territories of the Russian Empire. Now these are rather rare. Issued by the Gebet des Gebet des Oberbefehlshabers Ost. So by the military over commando of the East, or some such. So the occupied territories of the Russian Empire being the Baltics, Poland, and other parts of Belarus and Ukraine that were under German occupation from 1916, 17, 18. These coins were issued by the Germans to be used. And that also reminds me of more Asia. But we can end on that note in this video. So that's a 1 kopeck, and you might be wondering, what's that? Yes, it's a German ruble. 1 entire ruble issued by the Darlehenskassechain. Forgive my pronunciation, this was probably terrible. It's the Ostbank für Handel und Gewerbe, Darlehenskasse Ost, issued in Posen, today's Poznan, on the 17th of April 1916 for use in the occupied areas. A ruble in German issued by Germany. On the other side, we have a ton of different languages. Skolina Mosios Kasus Senklas Vienas Rublis. That sounds like Lithuanian. Vikas Kasi Ponskove Jeden Rubel. Sounds like Polish. Alftu Kafus Vens Rublis. The one of them is Lithuanian, so the other one must be Latvian. And on the bottom, we probably don't fake these banknotes in a ton of languages, but not Cyrillic. So I guess they were only meant to be used in the Baltics and Poland. So that's a 1 ruble, and I got it for surprisingly cheap actually. But I also believe it was improperly auctioned out in a less obvious title. So I thought, is that what I think it is, and it's only that cheap? Buy, insta buy. Because I probably guess they would go for twice as much. Not that expensive really, but yeah, these are very interesting pieces of history. But that was made up with the next one that I might have even overpaid for, but at least it's a part of my collection now. Now, we started off with occupation rubles, but I believe by we should take it out of the protective to see it properly. This might actually be one of the most expensive banknotes that I have ever bought. At least being this new. So we started off with rubles, and then they just went, well, screw it. So the Darlenskasse chain started issuing marks for the occupied territories. So this is 100 marks issued in Kovno on the 4th of April 1918 by the Darlenskasse Ost. So basically by the same organization as earlier. Die Enslug der Darlenskasse Ost in Reichsmark-Sum nennwert in von deutschen Reichs Gewährleistet, something like that. Yeah. To be redeemed in equal to 100 marks. I don't remember if there also is 1,000 mark banknote. There might be. But it's still one of the higher denominations for these occupation currencies of the Eastern Front. There were obviously 1 rubles and later 1 marks, 5, 10, 20, 50. But this is a 100 mark banknote. On the other side, we have, as with the other ones, different languages. Don't fake this banknote. Skolina Mosios Kasos Senklas. AFDV Kafas Fime. Latvian, Lithuanian, I think. But not Polish. Interestingly enough. Yeah, so I probably overpaid for this one. I believe they're at least valued over probably at least 40 to 50 euros, like 400 or 500 Swedish crowns, but I paid more than that. I just had to sacrifice myself for once, and I like, well, they can't be that common. They are not that common. They're not like the hyperinflation notes of years later, who exist still in millions of copies. This is still rather rare. So probably the most I paid for a banknote being issued in the 20th century, in the 1900s. I may have paid more for 1800s banknotes, but that's another matter for another time. But let me put these ones away, and we shall check out the one thing that I had forgotten today. We also have these ones. Ignore that one, that's a contemporary Icelandic banknote. But let's check out these ones. So this is a World War II era Chinese banknote for the non-occupied nationalist China, with, is it Chiang Kai-shek or is it Sun Yat-sen? Well, either or. I believe this one was issued in 1944. And China is on one side. On the other side, we have in English, and probably the highest amount of 500 you can ever see on one banknote. It's 500 yuan, which is a lot of money. Central Bank of China, but I believe it's printed in America. British American Banknote Company in 1944, yes. So this is a rather rare and in uncirculated condition also expensive banknote. But we are not here about the unoccupied part of China, we are here about the occupied part of China. Now this banknote is a Japanese yen, so it's a Japanese banknote to be used in Japan, or at least the design is. But all these red lettering that has been overstamped. Now someone actually told me what it means, because I didn't know before. But I believe it says to only be used in China by order of the military authorities. So it is a Japanese yen to be used for Japanese occupied parts of China. And it says that in large red letters. And we see the same thing on the other side. It's 10 yen. I was about to say the Japanese do not have English or Latin letters on their banknotes unlike the Chinese ones. But they did actually have at least 10 yen on the banknote. Something that I have bid on, but unfortunately never won. Maybe I was too cheap, but still it was pretty expensive for single banknotes. Was the banknotes issued by the Bank of Korea, Korea being an Japanese ruled part of the empire, and the Bank of Korea basically being a puppet bank and not independent in any shape or form. But the Bank of Korea also issued occupation currency for Manchuria and the rest of China under Japanese occupation. But unfortunately I don't have those because they turned out quite expensive at the auctions. But I do have those ones. And we also have a 5 yen banknote, that of course being 10 yen. And the people featured on them, I believe, are old philosophical people of Japanese history, not any newer people. To be used in China. And I'll say I also got these 4 surprisingly cheap. Obviously they are damaged, but even damaged, I believe I made a bargain. I don't really know if I want to disclose how little I actually bought them for, because this was shockingly cheap. Sometimes you're really lucky, and sometimes you find people who sell stuff who doesn't really know what they're selling, and then you can really get stuff for cheap. That was the price they offered, and I was like, yes, I take that. I don't know much about Japanese occupation money, but yes, I will pay that much. No problem. No questions asked. So that was a bit more of Asia, despite being Asian invasion money being featured in the last video. I can also add that I believe these ones were issued early on in the occupation, because they were later made proper, like I said, the Bank of Korea, proper original banknotes for use in the occupation of China. So I believe this was probably used earlier on in the occupation. I can add that, because they were, like I said, custom made later on. And that's the dog, and its hair over there. So that's the coins, that's the banknotes, and that's my son's toy car. And with that, thank you for watching, and I hope you learned something new today.